Cliff told me one time, I don't know if it's true or not, but it sure was funny. I was telling him about this guy's funny name one time, and Cliff goes, "That's nothing. I went to school with a guy named Walter Mellon."
So what year did you start with the band?
I started November 1984. Cliff was the first person I spoke to from the band.
Nice.
Yeah, he actually asked me if I knew anywhere he could score something to smoke, which I obliged, of course. And we became firm smoking buddies from that point on. You know, we were stoners. What can I say? You know.
Ah, beautiful.
You know, but for the most part, you know, he had his own clique, you know, his own group of friends, like, you know, Mike, Burton, and Jim Martin, and, you know, Dave Donato, and, you know, a few others.
Good first impression of Cliff.
Oh, fantastic. You know, but, you know, he had an aura about him anyway. You could always feel he was a very kind guy, you know, good soul, good heart, you know, and you could tell that. I gravitated to Cliff straight away. It was just like he was just a bit hillbilly, I suppose, as an English guy. He was a bit different. You know, this guy comes in and the way the choice of words that they Castro Valley guys use. I mean, Jim Martin's the same. Jim's a friend of mine.
Those guys in Castro Valley, I don't know if you've noticed it, but the real guys from Castro Valley from back in the day, they all sound the same.
And Jim, when I talk to Jim, it's like talking to Cliff. And there's a different phraseology they use, and it's really intriguing to talk to somebody that speaks. It's almost eloquent, but basic. It's very bizarre.
There is an accent in that town from that era. And if somebody starts talking, I already know where they're from, who they're probably friends with. But there's got to have been some sort of clique.
It's fun. It's a fun thing. So, you know, as soon as you started speaking to Cliff, it was there, and I found it refreshing. So to have him as my smoking buddy was kind of good times.
And there's another guy out there too, Tony Martin. He sounds just like Cliff and Jim and the rest of the guys. And I just go, God, that's another Castro Valley guy sounds just like him, you know? So whenever I see the older guys and they kind of talk like that, I go, from Castro Valley? Yeah, nice, I know Cliff. You know,
both cool, interesting people, Jim and Mike, and I can see the same flavor or same style, you know, that Cliff exuded back then is travels on with Mike and Jim both. So, you know, it must be in the Castro Valley water or something like that.
Oh, it is.
I mean, those guys, wow. I mean, pleasure to hang out with both, you know. But the actual thing from Castro Valley, it's very strong.
Right on.
Yeah, it's great. They've got their own language.
From Castro Valley myself, and we hold the Cliff Burton flag very strong. Like, that's our claim to fame. That's our pride and joy in our whole town.
Oh, that's fantastic. And couldn't be for a nicer person. Very deserving. The guy was really, really nice. You know, very sad what happened. But he lived his life to the full while he was around. I mean, I had some fun with him, and he was just, wow, he was on fire all the time. He was just a lit-up sort of person.
84 in my mind was like the golden year, because it was right, I mean, as far as the Bay Area scene goes, like 84, going in 85 was like the golden time for me, because it was right when it was still small. It was when it was still small, but then right before things got crazy.
So when that record came out, a lot of the underground metal community thought Metallica had sold out because there's acoustic guitars on there and there's more melody. I remember a lot of people called that record when it came out "Ride the Light Bulb." Like, are you crazy? Of course, those 10% of super hardcore people, you know, left, and a million other people came in, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. I'll never forget that. It was pretty controversial at the time in our little underground scene, where a lot of people are like, oh, they sold out. There's acoustic guitar on them. Like, what are you guys talking about? crazy.
Game changer really was Ride the Lightning for me. When that came, it just sounded like a totally different band.
Epic, a whole nother level, just like so killer, and the bass intro to For Whom the Bells Toll is just iconic, it's just can't be touched, and it's a killer album, there's a couple of filler songs on it, in my opinion, and people might yell at me, but I think it also has some of my favorite stuff.
And I remember when I heard Fight Fire with Fire, it was just so fucking fast and furious, man.
Like, I guess on Ride the Lightning, I could do without Escape, that's.
I think they don't like Escape either, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's pretty poppy,
Yeah.
Especially for an album that led off with Fight Fire with Fire.
Yeah.
It's like, get that out of here,
It was great. And the one thing about Kill 'Em All compared to like Ride the Lightning is the bass tone was different, I felt, or the frequencies were different because Lars's drum sound was a bit fatter on Ride the Lightning than it was on Kill 'Em All.
Mhm.
Kill 'Em All was a bit thinner, but Ride the Lightning had a fatter drum tone, and the guitar tone was definitely had a lot more woof to it. It was definitely had a lot of chunk, and Cliff just kind of somehow found his way in there. We used to always say back in the day, if you don't hear Cliff, you feel him. And that was true. You feel him a lot on that record.
People ask me shit like, why do you think Metallica got bigger? I said, because they were better. They really thought things through. Maybe Exodus were too high.
The intro to For Whom the Bell Tolls, where Cliff plays that riff, and it's so identifiable, It's such a great piece, and just the way he comes in is just so perfect, It's just a great moment.
The difference between Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning, did you attribute that change to Cliff bringing in his musical experience, knowledge, and technicality?
I think there was two things that happened on that record. Is number one, Cliff had been in the band for a while because really Kill 'Em All was not a lot about him. A lot of that stuff was written before he was there. So yes, absolutely, he brought a lot to the table there, and also just James as a singer becoming a much more confident, really good singer at that point. Those two things were what did it for me, where I was like, man, this album is a gigantic step up from before, and blew me away. And Cliff played an integral role on all three of those records, especially the final two was on, because he was probably more. James is a virtuoso when it comes to music and stuff, but Cliff had a wider range of influences than those guys did, and you could definitely see some of that coming in, starting with Ride the Lightning.
And I remember the first time reading a review of Metallica in Sounds, and it was like it was like science fiction or something, because Metallica's in Sounds, so it was that thing. So they were off conquering the world, but then it was almost like the old stories you hear when people in World War I or something, like they go out, they went off to war, the troops went off to war, and then you get these letters back dear Mom, I'm in the trenches fighting.
Playing instruments and stuff. He loved to just jam out in hotel rooms, jumping up and down on his bed, playing various things. I think he used to predominantly play a lead guitar as opposed to a bass. Now I used to have to keep fixing his little amplifier he used to wear on his belt, because he had headphones and he plugged the instrument into this Rockman, I think it was called, or something. And of course he'd jump up and down on the bed and the thing would end up going up the wall and getting smashed to bits. And he'd come in and go, "Man, can you fix this for me?" I'd be like, "Yeah, all right," because I was kind of the fix-it guy. I fixed that thing so many times, Oh, the battery leads fell off. Oh, this is that. The socket's broken. I bent the jack over and it snapped off, and it was endless. But he had such fun with that, In all fairness, that was probably the more favourable option to the Japanese throwing stars that he used to have with him, and he would throw in the wall in hotels, and if you ended up being in the room next to him, all you could hear was thump, thump, thump. and the only break was the time it took him to get up and retrieve them. You know, hotels weren't that impressed, in all fairness, with the holes and everything. No, just a character, massive character. You know, yeah, good guy.
You know, especially in '84, like the whole Bay Area scene was going off, like because all these kids were getting engaged and finding about Ruthie's Inn, and like Exodus was playing so much that all these kids who were getting into metal were really getting into the underground stuff because Exodus were playing so often, and you know they were cut from the same cloth as Metallica.
Yeah.
And then like you know, Exodus were, you know, driving the scene with all these other bands, and then Metallica came home like in '84 after their first European tour, and they played a secret show at the Mabuhay Gardens, like, and they billed themselves as Kill 'Em All. Even it was even in the newspaper, Kill 'Em All. So like it was like
everybody knew at that point.
And I also noticed that when the band kind of came back from Europe, they had, you know, I said this before in an interview, they were kind of somebody that I learned about like exotic booze from, you know, Jägermeister, and they were drinking Heineken, and they had been to Europe, you know, and in a van. There was just something different about those guys.
It was almost like that. Like Metallica went off to Europe, literally went off to Europe to fight the metal wars, and we'd like get postcards from them, and like, you know, they'd be telling their adventures, and then it was just like, you know, like just like those old war stories, like the home front. Like we get random postcards from them, like they're out there fighting the metal wars, and then we get like newspaper dispatches, like in sounds, like, you know, a show review or album review from, you know, in England, like, you know, and England going off, you know, the English underground metal press going off about Metallica, and then they come home, and it was like, you know, not like, you know, the boys are home, like.
And at the time, I thought they were way older than me, but I'm 55 now. I think James is 59.
We're celebrating Cliff's 60th today, so yeah, a
there
little bit
you
older.
go. Yeah. So 5 years older. But you know, when you're a kid, let's say you're 16 or 15 and you're seeing the guys around the club, you know, because you're in the club, you're 15. It's so weird to think about now, you know, just 15 out every night, all night. But 5 years is a lot, you know.
Especially
these guys had like, they had sideburns, you know.
They were the older kids.
Yeah. And they were, they had been places. So, you know, to me, Cliff always just kind of seemed like this kind of, you know, like the bikers in my neighborhood. There was this biker named No Worky Don, and he was scary as fuck. And to me, Cliff just kind of seemed like one of those guys.
Yeah.
He wasn't mean or anything, but it was like, whoa, he's wearing the bell-bottom Levi's and the Levi jacket. He's got the black fingerless gloves on. He had a tattoo. There was only a couple guys back then that had tattoos, one of them being Tom Araya. Other than that, around the scene, there were like 3 dudes that had tattoos.
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa, he's got a, you know, the fucking Misfits skull, you know?
Maybe he had an older soul, I've come to pick up on.
Yeah, he was older anyway than the other guy. You know, I think Cliff was like, I think he was probably a couple of years older than the rest of the guys. And I don't know. I mean, since meeting the family, Ray, bless him, you know, and Jan, you could see Cliff had a massive common sense streak in him. He had real warmth about him, but a real common sense approach to things. If it was stupid, if something was stupid to do, he would call it as being stupid. He wasn't anybody's fool, but because he was so open with people. You know, when the band rehearsed in Birmingham, my hometown, where I am now, in fact, I had a rehearsal complex there. I owned a lighting and rehearsal place, and the band went in there and rehearsed. And I used to have GBH rehearsing there as well, which was one of the guys' favourites. In fact, I worked for GBH before I worked for Metallica. I mean, I did the first tour of America with GBH in 1981, I think it was. So they got to hang out together. And we had a pub over the road from Concert Lighting, which was the name of the establishment. And they had a pool table. And God, the amount of non-rehearsal that went on, because GBH and Metallica were all over the Fountain pub just across the street, and Cliff was playing pool all night, you know, all day. You know, those guys would just go. It was so, they were pretty funny. And Cliff just got on with everybody. You know, everybody would gravitate to him because he was such a nice guy to talk to. Like I said, the accent thing goes a long way. I know I got away with it in America for years. Just, you know, it's a bit different now. You used to get, gee, I just love your accent. It's like, no, okay, that's kind of gone now. But it worked in reverse on us too. We like Cliff's accent. And I think everybody felt it. And, you know, and he was fun to play with, as I said, you know. When we did gigs on Ride the Lightning, if you couldn't find Cliff, then predominantly Cliff would be in the bar having a beer with the kids. Just standing there chatting. No need to push and shove to talk to him. He would just hang out as long as it took. And half the time you'd be like, Cliff, you got to come because you got to go on stage in a bit, you know, that kind of thing. That's all he liked to do. He was a very sociable person. He liked to hang out and chat to people. And he liked to play pool, I guess.
Nice.
The first time we played club shows before, but when our first album came out, we were doing the whole Raven tour. The last show of the tour was in New York at a place called Roseland. Metallica were also on the bill. So it was Anthrax, Metallica, Raven, and both bands got signed that night. We got Metallica got signed by Elektra, and then we were pursued by another label, which would later become Island Records.
Obviously, you know, being on Megaforce was a great start, but at that point, I'm an independent label too, and I had no qualms with any band signing the major label. So we're just a tiny little label. We can't do anything next to what the major labels were doing. So I was very happy that they went there, and happy after I met Alago that he was a cool guy and a metal guy too. So he understood how things should be done. He wasn't gonna, because a lot of times what happens when these bands get signed to major labels, you know, the major labels come in and they want them to be different and they screw the thing up. But I knew Alago wasn't going to do that. So that was good. I was happy for them.
At that moment, did you know things were really changing?
Oh yeah, that show is when I realized people like this. There's a sound and a style that is resonating with teenagers, and this is it. This is the future. Me myself, I was 20 years old, maybe around that time. It's crazy to think that I was on tour when I was like 19, 20 years old, you know. Yeah, it's nuts. Right out of school and stuff. So most of us were the same age, and we were just experiencing life on the road, experiencing the world. You know, the first time I had to get a passport, it was like, how do I do this? You know,
to be in your mid-20s and be a part of a movement that's happening worldwide, and to see it grow from 2 years prior has to be amazing.
It was, and it was so organic. It just happened.